Hello, everyone. This is episode 17 of the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about protest music, revolutionary thinking, and political commentary. My name is 4AS, and this is my co-host, Mr. E. So, Mr. E, how are you going today?
I am very good. 4IS, how are you?
Yeah, I'm going pretty well. And I thought let's keep the ball rolling with some pretty interesting stuff you've been doing lately.
Okay.
And I thought let's go into cultural capitalism and PC culture
Hmm.
because that was another interesting one that you did.
Yes, quite controversial, I think. It's not a comfortable topic for a lot of people, especially people that would describe themselves as progressive or even revolutionary. They like to sit on the side, I would say, of political correctness, um, and I guess, yeah, that sort of progressive outlook on life. So it's quite confronting, I think, talking about these things, especially looking at them through a revolutionary lens and critiquing them in the context of living in a bourgeois or capitalist society. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, is that every single day you're being sold a product, whether it's you watching something on TV, whether you're walking on the street and there's just billboards around.
Mm.
People are exposed and, if not inundated, with marketing. So it's understandable that it's almost when you encounter these sort of things, it's second nature. And when when you are discussing these sort of topics of, well, hey, do you realize you're being sold an experience? So, like,
Mm.
as you say in the video, like it's probably harmless. It's probably harmless when somebody says, "Oh, buy this four-wheel drive, and you'll be like Indiana Jones." Like, probably that sort of comparison is probably a bit harmless,
Mm.
but
Mm.
I think it's worth saying. Well, this insurance company that has the LGBTQI plus flag, or at least all the selection of flags, and they're like, oh, we support the community. I feel like you could legitimately, or at least legitimately say to them and ask, okay, well, what sort of causes are you supporting with your insurance policies? Like, I don't know, is there somewhere in Africa where LGBTQI plus people are being persecuted that you're making sure that all of the money is going to them? Like,
Mm.
details, people, details.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the issue or the discussion
Mm,
around political correctness and wokeism, whatever terminology you want to use for it, whatever euphemism you want to
mm,
use for it, is how the essence of it, it's moral decency, how it strives to try and set a standard for people to associate with one another based on breaking down walls of prejudice is extremely diminished, and kind of degraded by the fact that everything in a capitalistic society can have a price on it and can be used to try and push products onto you and consumer goods onto you. So at the individual level, wokeism, being politically correct, there's nothing wrong with that in essence. But when it's kind of mass produced and sold to people in a very consumeristic way, that it loses all of its authenticity. And I think people are coming to that realization. They can't put their finger on it as such, but there's a general and a large frustration out there about the idea of political correctness or wokeism and PC culture
mm,
going too far. And the argument that I've tried to make in the video log that you were talking about
mm,
before is that this is a result of corporate greed. They have hijacked an individual notion, and something that I think people like to hold themselves to show that they are accepting. It's very much aligned with 21st century morality. People try to be more tolerant, and
Mm,
they try to be just generally accepting people. And like this goes for any side of politics. It doesn't matter if you're conservative or progressive, right or left wing. It doesn't matter. I think people are just generally tolerant in the 21st century, and they kind of pride themselves on that at an individual level. But when it's blown up with identity politics, with marketing campaigns that are in
mm,
your face from the moment you go to sleep at night, when you're holding your phone, you fall asleep to first thing that you see on when you pick up your phone in the morning. Once people are hounded and harassed through marketing, and
mm,
they have this image pushed upon them because somebody's had the wise idea that's going to sell, then that's when it becomes toxic, and that's when it becomes unbearable. So in essence, PC culture
mm,
is not a problem in and of itself. It's when it has been co-opted to serve some
mm.
capitalist agenda, that's when it's a problem. And I don't think that's talked about enough these days.
Well, I think going back to what you were saying before with the essence of, well, people know that there's something wrong, but they can't put their finger on it. I think it goes back to the idea that, uh, pardon my French, but one thing that I think humans are really good at doing is sniffing out bullshit. They do have an inherent um, logic, or at least gut feeling within them, that if they are being sold something that is incredibly surface level, um, unless it is marketed in that sort of way, then and that's the thing about this kind of cultural capitalism with companies, like I was saying before, is that if you are saying you support a certain community, well, give us proof. Don't just have a flag or say we're approved by this thing, and then say, okay, job well done. Like, actually show how you're contributing to the community. And really, when you look into it, I think it's incredibly surface level, and that's when people are like, "Aha, you're full of BS."
Yeah,
And that's when you suddenly are losing people, because at the end of the day, it's not that company, especially as for-profit companies that end up doing this sort of cultural capitalism thing. Uh, you'll find that at the end of the day, they just want to profit. It like, sure, I'm sure they would donate. There's certain donations to a charity that helps in this sort of thing, or they would have done the partnership because on some sort of fundamental level they must agree to it. But at the end of the day, they're there to make a profit.
that's right. And it's very superficial. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's got this element of tokenism to it.
Mm,
People can see that. Like humans, I think you said something quite correct there, are quite good at noticing when things are genuine or not. And in a capitalistic society, and especially after you have things that are pushed on to you by the corporate world, you know what the bottom line is. It's not to help this marginalized community or this marginalized person or group. It
mm,
is exactly that. It is because this is the in thing right now, potentially, and that will turn a profit. And
mm,
that's it. And so this superficiality is seen and felt through and through. And it's hard for people to stomach having to be continually tolerant of things, especially if the goalposts are changing all the time and potentially even exponentially.
mm,
And then they know that nothing is really being looked at. beyond that surface level. So if you have an image of, multiracial families or transgender people, all these things, promoting a product, then people know that that's as far as it's ever going to go. It's just
Mm,
an emotional tool. And then when that starts to seep into other facets of people's life, then they start to become frustrated with things and they start to become angry with it
mm,
because it then becomes to set the tone for maybe their social circumstances or their political situation. And it starts to set the tone for other things because primarily, again, in a capitalist society, the agenda is set by big money and it's set by
mm.
the agendas of corporations and those with the influence over public opinion, which is those that influence media and governments. And so, like, that's why I also make another point in the video that it's quite laughable and ludicrous, actually,
Mm.
that the left is blamed for the issue with wokeism and PC culture,
Mm.
like there is some group of lefties out there that are sitting down deciding on a daily basis what the new PC item of the day is going to be, what the new woke focus is going to be of that day or that week or that month. It's just absolutely ridiculous because I think we all know that you know, lefties really couldn't organize themselves to do anything. Like, I'd love them to be able to organize themselves to revolutionize once in a while. That would be nice. But they really can't, even decide on anything in tandem. So, deciding what is going to be the discussion in terms of what's the most PC topic of the day is
Mm.
just absolutely ridiculous. And that there would be some type of PC police out there that decides certain things is, yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And I think it's important for the people that are using it to push their own corporate agendas and profit driven agendas to have somebody else to blame for this
Mm.
because people can't disassociate the two. They can't see that PC culture is co-opted by corporate agendas to push products. They just can't see that amongst the hatred for progressives and lefties.
Yeah, like I do have like a number of questions for today, and I guess one question that I definitely have is one of the things that you go into in the video is the Netflix reaction to go woke, go broke.
Mm.
And obviously Netflix turned around and when things weren't working out with their woke agenda, that they basically turned around and said, nah, stuff this. We're not going to do this anymore, and you're going to rock with this because we, at the end of the day, we kind of want to make a profit. But I see that happen with Netflix, but then at the very least, people can decide whether this is true or not. But it seems you turn around and you look at Disney and it seems like they're doubling down on their PC culture and their wokeness because, uh, again, like I said, you can kind of decide for yourself, audience, but like all of the latest Marvel shows, for example, people keep on accusing them of being woke and, at least being surface level with this sort of thing. And it seems like capitalism is possibly on the fence as to whether this marketing exercise is working or not. Like, is there any other major examples that you can think of, or was that just the main one, and you kind of think there's just been a turning of a tide kind of
I
thing?
think that exemplifies perfectly what we're talking about here, how wokeism, PC culture has been co-opted for the corporate agenda.
Mm,
I can't think of any better examples than the Netflix reaction. And that is one, they started doing things that they thought were going to bring them profit. And they were pandering potentially to people within their own workforce that were pushing these ideas
Mm.
very ardently. And then when they realized that following that script was going to cost them subscriptions, i.e., money, then they quickly turned around and abandoned that position, going so far as to say to those people within their organization,
Mm.
you don't like it, you're out. So it's not just like we're not going to be doing this anymore. We're going to take a new direction or we're going to seek an old or former direction. They literally said and threatened people that if they had a problem with it, then there's the door. Now, that is a perfect example of a corporate agenda because the bottom line is profit. It's not morality, and
Mm.
it's not being there to set some type of standard for society. We think this is the direction that humanity should be going in, so we're going to push that onto people whether they like it or not, and
Mm.
people will have to make a decision about whether they want to be with us or not. That is leadership, and that is being avant-garde. Capitalism has, in terms of being consumerist, has got
Mm.
nothing to do with being avant-garde. Absolutely nothing. The only time that it is avant-garde is in or under the laws of coercive competition, which is another concept I talked about in the video. And the
Mm.
laws of coercive competition are thus that some capitalists in a certain market or in a certain industry will find the edge over the rest of their competitors. And that new form, that new way of doing things, if that becomes the mode of what is most profitable in that industry, in that market, then they will have the edge until everybody else figures it out and
Mm.
jumps on it too. And then it's no longer avant garde. And then somebody else has to develop and revolutionize their industry to become that most
Mm.
profitable, front runner again. And those people who choose deliberately to not get on that train are left behind.
Mm.
And that is just part of the laws of coercive competition. And so people, I think corporations have been jumping on massively from insurance to media to what have you. They've been jumping on the woke script, the PC culture script for a long time now in order to make sure that they are appealing to what they think is a broad ranged audience. Now, if you've detected before, there's this kind of capitalism starting to sit on the fence with things, it is because society is becoming frustrated with things generally and sitting on the fence and teetering on the edge between what is too extreme and what is acceptable is now becoming the norm. And what I'm trying to say and develop in the argument in that video is that as soon as it becomes no longer profitable at all, it will be thrown out. If it no longer
Mm.
helps them sell their products, it's gone.
Because, like, the other question that I have is a lot of people use the word PC culture and they almost always link it to a discussion of identity politics.
Mm.
And do you think that those words are synonyms of each other? Because at least I'll give you a little background of the reason why I kind of bring this up is that I kind of feel like at least nowadays, because we've kind of got this marketing mindset, and there's at least a lot more focus on people's values within things, it has affected our politics. And I can't speak for anywhere else but Australia and possibly and also America, but definitely in both of the last federal elections for both of those countries, there has been a period where identity politics very much and culture wars very much like took a hold. And surprisingly, both of them were around transgender people in sports for whatever reason. But it almost got to a point where where people were questioning, being like, wait, what does this have? Like, why is this being, why is petrol being poured on the fire here? Like, why is this even an issue to begin with? And people were legitimately getting fired up about this issue when, really, hey. Shouldn't we be talking about education? Shouldn't we be talking about the tax system? It was almost a diversion of things in traditional politics that should be discussed. And yeah, I kind of want to bring back, are those two words synonymous? Are they exactly the same thing? Or do they just make an unholy marriage that we have to kind of reconcile in the modern age?
I think they are, in the sense that identity politics, if you can split things into dichotomies, if you can split things basically into two,
Mm,
then I think there is a definite relationship between identity politics on the one hand and the culture wars or PC culture. So you have people that will sit on either side of the fence of the issue of being politically correct and it going too far. Just like in identity politics, when it comes to elections and politics, you have people that sit on the left ring and then you have those who sit on the right. So if you can associate being politically correct to being more progressive, and you can consider not caring so much about political correctness or either despising it, that is synonymous with being conservative or right wing. And
mm,
so, yes, I think they can be used synonymously, but that's a problem because, and that's a point that I've been trying to make, is that politically being politically correct
mm,
is not a problem in and of itself, and especially not on the individual level. When it comes to two people or people interacting with one another in the real world,
mm,
in real life, there is nothing wrong with people being tolerant of one another and not prejudicing each
mm,
other because of their differences, and even going as far as to accept others based on their differences. And I think that, and this is what gets lost in the mix, is that's actually what happens in real life. Most people, when put in a confrontational situation, in reality, won't react and start attacking other people for being different to them, or celebrating their own diversity and stuff like that. You don't have to like it, but you wouldn't go off at them and you wouldn't degrade them and you wouldn't
mm,
hold it against them as such. But when you have things that are drawn out into the political spectrum and you have people that are fueled in talking about the petrol being put on fires because they exist in echo chambers in social media
mm,
environments and stuff like that. That's where this stuff gets blown out of proportion and does become directly associated with identity politics. You identify with being politically correct and you want to be on the edge and be the most woke.
mm,
Or as the antithesis to that, you want to be the most anti-woke because that's what defines you, standing up to the PC police and all
mm,
these woke people out there that just want to take away my freedoms and all that sort of stuff. That becomes defining moments in people's personalities and puts them in positions where they hate the other. And so that's a big part of identity politics is, yes, at its core, identifying with a certain thing and hammering that home and, dying by it almost. And so that's where I think, yeah, those two things marry up. And it's unfortunate because my opinions on identity politics as well.
Yeah, but like you do raise a really good point, and it may be a psychology point, but the thing is, probably the reason why petrol has been poured onto this issue or this bin fire of an issue is well, the internet exists, and the thing is, if you were walking down the street and you bump into someone, um in a virtual reality, if that were to happen, you'd probably absolutely go off at that person. But I can tell you for certain, well, you might get in their face. You might do that, but to be honest, I highly doubt that you would. You'd most likely go like, "Oh, sorry about that," and then just keep on walking. But people are far more reactionary, and people get up into a further on the internet because at least when you're using people as a vehicle for your frustration or your anger or however you're feeling, you're not necessarily treating others as people. Once you immediately have a vehicle of to vent however you're feeling, I feel like people are much more justified. Like actually being face to face with people, that's when social relations kick in. And hey, you could get up in people's faces, but then you immediately have to register the consequences of that. And especially, say, for example, if you were in a pub and you're being loud and raucous and pushing people over, the bouncers are going to come straight up to you and you're going to be out that door. So, yeah, once you present an avenue for people to basically behave badly, then they're gonna behave badly.
Yes, yes, I agree. And it's very much like the social experiment or the observation, at least,
Hmm.
of people experiencing road rage when they're in the safety of their car behind their dashboard and behind the windscreen. Someone cuts them off or does something stupid in front of them, they'll go off absolutely in the safety of their car. They become this hyper aggressive and confronting animal, yelling profanities and threatening violence and what have you. But that's from the safety of sitting down in their car. If they were
Hmm.
out in the person, as soon as someone gets out of the car, or those two people, yeah, have to face the fact that there's another human being there that they're interacting with, not just some faceless driver in another car, then the aggression completely dissipates, almost to a point of they become into a situation where it's fight or flight, and
Hmm.
they will just flee the situation, and then maybe they'll mull it over later. But like that's the type of experience that is felt by identity politics driven political correctness and wokeism. Once you start identifying with something just because you identify with the issue and it's because it's become an us versus them thing, it loses its humanity. And this is what capitalism does. It
Hmm.
tears away the humanity out of moral issues through consumer capitalism to deliver you a product. And this is like, I think this is where we're coming full circle from where we started with this.
Hmm.
That's what consumer capitalism is. There's no longer, like back in the day, you bought a pair of boots because they were the goddamn best boots on the market. This capitalist X makes the best shoes. And so you buy those shoes because they just are going to last forever or they just feel amazing when you walk around. Now you buy shoes because you can pump them up and you can potentially jump 6 feet in the air and, slam dunk a basketball. Or, these shoes are really well designed for running. And so I can leg it from the cops. Like it's got nothing to do with the product anymore. It's got to do with the experience. And wokeism is very much an experience when it comes to having things marketed to people and pushed in their faces. And, when it's fueled by politics, that's where people just go absolutely crazy. They can't disassociate one from another. And anything that is not agreeable to them then becomes the enemy. And I do foresee a point in the not too distant future where wokeism and PC culture and all that sort of stuff will stop being profitable. I don't think we're there yet. And I think there's still a lot more of it to come. but
Mm.
because it hasn't hit enough industries yet. Netflix got a taste of it, but like there's so many industries out there that I believe still profit off it greatly. And yeah, until enough people start boycotting things on that direct provision that they just don't want to have this
Mm.
stuff thrown in their faces anymore, and people start to really feel it in their pockets and on the share markets and such, I think, yeah, it'll be at that point then that this stuff will just not fly anymore. And it'll just become this secondary issue. It'll go back to being something that people discuss on an individual level and they don't really take much notice of anymore. But at the moment, it's just so on everyone's lips and in everyone's faces. And that's the problem with it.
Well, this could be me being cynical, but the thing is, the fact that Disney is weighing in on this, and I guess going back to the Marvel comment that I made earlier, is um what's the common phrase? The um what's worse than being talked about not being talked about. So at least you could take the cynical view that, well, it hasn't exactly hit their bottom line yet. So even if not everyone agrees with them, then those that agree with them will obviously defend them. But those of them that don't agree with them, there's enough of them, and maybe there's a certain portion of people that simply just don't care. But there's enough people that they don't believe in this sort of selling of a product, but they're making enough noise, because that's definitely the thing about the people that don't like PC culture and this kind of cultural capitalism. They let you know. They are, you know, they're basically um what everyone accuses vegans of. They're like, oh, you know, I don't like PC culture. You know, I don't like wokeism. If you didn't know, I'll tell you that right now. Like, that's the thing about those sort of reactionary people, is that they do let you know they don't like something, and they'll scream about it on the internet. So I
Like
wonder,
it's just before them, they were the most vocal. And now I think that the opposite are becoming the more vocal.
yeah, and like I think more to my point is that um yeah, the fact that they're making all of the noise, maybe people wouldn't think about watching that or think about those products if these people weren't making all of the noise. Because
Mm.
I can tell you right now, all of the all of the products that Marvel have put out. Personally, I wouldn't have checked them out if people weren't hammering on about them, about it being too woke or being too PC. I wouldn't have been like, oh, well, this has actually gotten a lot of bad press. Maybe I should check it out and form my own opinion.
Yes, yeah. There was someone that came up recently for me. I'm not a big, I'm not into Marvel at
Yeah,
all. Um, I don't really have the time to look at a lot of media, but there was something recently about She-Hulk, I believe, and people
yeah,
were like, well, "This is just wokeism gone mad," kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And if it wasn't for people having a debate about that, whether they liked it or didn't, I would
Hmm.
never have known that it existed. I would never have known that it existed. And so, maybe there is something in having something controversial and being, talked about negatively or positively, whatever. It's just advertising in and of itself because, like you said before, people
Hmm.
are talking about it. And so, any publicity in that sense is good publicity because at least people know about what it is that you're selling. And so, until it really does become too hard to sell things because people would describe it as woke, and woke has become
Hmm.
such a degraded word that it now is a negative. Until it becomes completely negative, then it's just going to be used as a good tool to spark a conversation and to get people talking about things.
Well, see, the thing is, I'll use an example, but basically my thesis about this is that any sort of publicity is good publicity, because during the first reactionary, because I'll use the example of She-Hulk, in the first reactionary movement that happened that, oh, She-Hulk is woke, She-Hulk isn't funny. There was a specific YouTuber that actually created a video that analyzed the first episode scene by scene. But what was funny is that in that analysis, there's actually a specific scene in the first episode where it's very obvious that the She-Hulk character is being harassed by men. And this reactionary YouTuber was like, "Oh, it's not like the guys were doing anything wrong," and like he did whatever his analysis was. But then the PC people started reacting to that take. And then it was hot take after hot take after hot take. And then suddenly it just started getting a lot of traction. And then all of a sudden, people like me were like, oh, maybe I should watch this now to check this out. So
Mm.
cultural capitalism, um, people reacting to one side or the other, people basically being pushed to one side or the other of, oh, what's wrong with PC culture? Oh, PC culture gone mad, and it's all good for business.
Yes, yes. And that's, if you can draw an analogy there between division and conquering something, then that's exactly reflected in identity politics. Because once
Mm,
you have identity politics that are divisive and basically push people to either extreme, then you have people squabbling over and discussing things, or not discussing,
mm,
debating or arguing amongst themselves and not focusing on the real matter at hand. Which, whether or not, so in politics, whether or not the establishment is good or not, and whether you should be uniting to fight the establishment. And if it's in the case of She-Hulk, you have people fighting over things and wanting to watch it over and over again to analyze it and just have their own opinions on it. But which they should really be talking about is whether or not it's a good piece of content to watch in the first place. And if it's a piece of crap and it's rubbish television, then they shouldn't even be talking about it at all. But they have been manipulated into this fever, and they're going to consume that all the way, all the way. And who wins? Disney does, right? Because they own the Marvel franchise. Is that right?
well, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I don't see any problem from their standpoint, whether it's controversial or not. Still selling stuff, still selling.
Well, you know what? I just thought of this right now, but maybe that's the difference between Disney and Netflix. Because the thing is, everyone knows that Netflix, in terms of its stock and everything, it's been steadily going down.
Mm.
So at least the reaction of them turning around and at least agreeing with the people of go woke, go broke, maybe that's reflected in their profit line where they haven't been doing so crash hot. So maybe they were open to the idea of, well, we won't care about this PC culture and cultural capitalism thing anymore. But at least the kind of culture war when it comes to PC culture, that hasn't necessarily done the same thing to Disney. So
Yeah.
maybe they are completely fine with stoking the flames when it comes to products such as She-Hulk, because, well, we're Disney, we can do whatever we want. So when it comes to monopolies, they're
Mm.
willing to hold on to these sort of ideals because it's not hitting their products and their profit line.
Yes.
Whereas maybe a small to medium business, um, they'll go along with the trend if it suits them, but
Yes.
then they'll change their tact as soon as it's not working out for them, which goes back to what you were saying.
And in capitalism, monopolies write their own rules as well.
Hmm.
Yes, if Disney are the player that they are, which there's no one really quite like them. They probably would, yes, be writing their own rules and playing by their own game. They're at the top with the absolute reach and control that they have. Netflix is in a bit of a bind anyway. It was already
Hmm.
failing And so it's very sensitive to being controversial, but Disney probably doesn't have that susceptibility. And any of the weak points that Netflix are currently dealing with, if anything, when it comes to subscription-esque media, Disney is basically on the rise as opposed to Netflix, which is kind of the old dog in that game.
Well, I think Disney had a lot of power to begin with, and really Netflix was doing well until Disney and Amazon and pretty much every other of the heavy hitters decided to come on. It's only really started to go down when the heavy hitters came in. And really, I guess if you're that sort of company, you're willing to put out as many voices as you want to because it's good for business.
Mm.
And you stole my thunder before, but I think you did raise a good point that identity politics, it's if you if you if you focus on issues that are to do with this group, to do with this group, to do with this group, and make sure that there's a us versus them mentality, then I guess your working masses aren't uniting, they're dividing. And I guess it's a more of a revolutionary take, but if your masses are dividing rather than grouping together in solidarity, then they're not necessarily going to take on the capitalists and those that are in power.
That's right. That is absolutely right. Identity politics, and if wokeism and the culture wars is a reflection or a refraction of that larger um, ideology or that larger debate, it's anti-revolutionary. It's anti-revolutionary for IS every
Hmm.
day of the week, and so we should be conscious of that.
Well, this might be a hot take, and it's a completely different topic altogether. Like we would probably have to dedicate a completely different podcast episode to this. But I guess you could also make an argument that if you if you devote yourself to the class struggle, then maybe along the way you might heal those identity politics issues that you want. Because if I'm not mistaken, um, uh, during the Russian Revolution, there was a range of different ethnicities and uh, uh, genders and sexual orientations that were part of that group that
Mm.
they banded together and overthrew the Tsarist government.
Yeah,
So if you commit yourself to the class, it's a point worth ramming home that if you commit yourself to the class struggle, you can you can probably correct other issues along the way. Like you don't have to do one thing or the other. You can do everything all at once.
exactly. Yes, and that's the ultimate argument when it comes to seeking some type of socialist revolution to bring about communism is once you go to the root of the problem, which is bourgeois ideology in a capitalist system, and you deal with the inequalities and the prejudices that provides or creates, then everything else that seems like a problem just
Hmm.
magically disappears. From racism to identity politics, from inequality to to being politically correct, and the toxicity that's involved with wokeism. All of that stuff is a side issue to the grander issue, which is there is a disparity and a problem with one class ruling over another. And that's usually a small minority of people that are subjugating and exploiting a large majority who are divided and bickering amongst themselves. As soon as you focus all of your attention on that exploitation and removing that subjugation, all those other issues will fall away. Fall
Hmm.
away. And yes, that was exemplified in the Russian Revolution because you had people in like, the
Yeah.
early 20th century that were living in this kind of, yeah, tolerant utopia almost, and they were accepting of one another's differences because they were provided for as a large class, a working class of people. And once their basic needs are met, they're much nicer to one another in the
Well,
end.
if I remember correctly, the 1905 revolution, the very first one, um, it it wasn't sparked by some Russian miners. It was a factory full of female workers. Well, if I remember correctly, Leon Trotsky's book on the Russian revolutions. I'm pretty confident 1905, and at least also the October Revolution. I'm pretty confident. I'm more confident on the 1905 than the October Revolution, but I'm pretty confident it was started by female workers. So, you know, not a bunch of miners. It was a bunch of textile workers.
Yes, very interesting point.
Okay, well, with that, the prompt for this week was cultural capitalism and PC culture trying to make a profit. And yeah, the prompt thought, or at least the AI art, thought to do a rave where, yeah, it seems like some sort of mind control that's happening in their heads. So, yes, I think the AI thought that PC culture has gone mad,
Very interesting.
which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, and remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And to close this out, I'll give it to you, Mr. A.
Thank you for IS. And to everybody out there, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.